Welcome to the next episode of In China Between Meetings with your host Marian Danko, aka China Hustler. We talk about innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship. This series of interviews brought to you by We Hustle, a Shanghai-based platform for innovation and technology, helping international and local teams succeed in China. And today I'm welcoming Erik Walenza-Slabe, who is CEO of IoT One and also director of Startup Grind Shanghai chapter, and also a part of the Technology and Innovation Committee of American Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Erik.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to have this chat, Marian. Thanks for inviting me on.
You also a husband and father. Having all these titles come with responsibilities and commitment. I think there are lots of founders who are trying to understand how to manage the time. So can you give a couple of examples? How do you manage your time? You mentioned before that you also don't use much WeChat and LinkedIn, and I guess you have some other social media as well. What time do you go to bed? What time do you wake up? So can you share some useful tips and healthy habits to manage your time properly?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you know, when I was in management consulting before, the firm was called Applied Value, AV, and we would call ourselves the AV SEALs, like the Navy SEALs. And the Navy SEALs are, hard workers, right? And that was the mentality. It was you work hard, you play hard, and regularly you'd be on a project and you would be up until 6 a.m., 7 a.m. because you have to hit a deliverable. And my mentality now is that doesn't work, right? You burn out. It works if you have to hit a deliverable, right? But it doesn't work for the long term. And I think entrepreneurship is it's not a sprint.
哎，你好，
飞到这里来了，
怎么可能？
我们懂吗？
哎呦，不好意思，一直走，
看好。
不好意思，不好意思。
Okay, just a little hello from the police. Yeah, so anyways, it's really a marathon, right? And so for me, the critical things are simplify where you can, and then have consistency. And so simplify means my life is, getting married, having a kid, to some extent, it allows you to simplify your life. I know I'm going to work, I'm going home, gonna put my kid to bed, got another hour or two to maybe answer some emails, do some work at night, and I'm going to bed by 10:30. I have an alarm clock, which is my baby. So he wakes up pretty much 6:30 every day. He gets me up, and that's my schedule. And it's extremely consistent, right? I don't have all-nighters. I got a wife. I'm not going out on dates. I'm not going partying. So my life is pretty simple there. And then in terms of time management, it's putting your phone away. Right? I mean, these are kind of simple things, but you often don't reflect on how many times you check WeChat during the day. And that's really a distraction, right? It's a huge time waster if you're trying to focus on something and all of a sudden you're thinking, okay, what's happening on WeChat? Do I need to reply to this? So just minimizing distractions has been really a focus of mine these past couple of years.
Great, thank you. Where are you coming from? Where did you grow up? And did you have any links to China before you came actually to China?
Yeah, no, I'm from Portland, Oregon, West Coast, US, beautiful city, but zero links to China. I mean, I didn't think about China until I was just coming back from Central America. I think I'd graduated, I was maybe 22, went to a party and somebody mentioned that they had just come back from China and how interesting it was. And I thought, okay, I don't really know what I'm doing. I just got back from Central America, no plans. Let's see what China looks like. So that was how I kind of first came over here, but I had no expectations, no connections, not much of a plan, to be honest, at that point, just an interest.
Interesting. And how did you end up in China? What was your China story? Why did you come here? What did you do first?
Yeah, it was not a very strategic entry, to be honest. I found a university that would basically pay for my flight and give me a salary. It happened to be based in a suburb of Nanjing, and so I was there. It was supposed to be a year contract. 6 months into it, winter hit, pollution, cold. I was in the suburbs where it was like me and a few other kind of oddball, teachers, guys that are 45 and got kicked. One guy got kicked out of Thailand after you can imagine what it takes to get kicked out of Thailand. So anyways, I stayed for 6 months and then I said, okay, China's super interesting. The suburbs of Nanjing are not the place for me. And then I popped over to Korea, spent some time in Nepal, spent some time in Japan, just having a look around. But I had in mind to come back to China. And maybe in reflection, I kind of wished instead I'd just come straight to Shanghai. But I think when you're young, you experiment, and it takes some time to figure out where your interests are.
Interesting. So what was your first job in China when you come back again?
Yeah, so when I came back, I was doing an MBA over at George Washington University in DC. They had a partnership with Fudan, and I was doing a dual degree, MBA and MA. So it was 3 years, and I basically talked a couple professors into letting me do research projects, for credit. And so I spent about a year and a half, about half that time at Fudan and half that time doing independent research. And I started working with Applied Value, this management consultancy at that point. So that was it. So I worked with them while I was doing my MBA. When I finished my MBA, I stayed on and ended up running the office there here in China for a few years.
So before we dive into IoT One, your current company that you founded, did you have any prior entrepreneurial experiences before starting with IoT One?
Yes, I had one extremely unsuccessful experience. So I started up a company that was, the premise was parents in China pay a tremendous amount of money getting their kids into college, and then kids graduate from college, and often they're not very well positioned for the professional world, right? So I thought, okay, there's a need there to help company, especially kids that are graduating and want to go into management consulting, finance, these types of fields. Can I then source people that are working in these fields to weekends, evenings to train students on how can you get my job? Whether it's here's the interview process or here are the financial skills that you need to learn. That was the premise, and I think the premise makes sense still, but there was a couple problems on the sales side, and that's where I realized that it's not just around does your service kind of make sense, but you really have to think through what are your sales channels, who are your customers, who's the buyer and who's the customer. So here the buyer was the parent. The parent might be in Hefei, right? Might be in probably not in Shanghai actually. And of course the users, the customers were here in China. They were the students. So I had a double sale. First I had to convince the students this was interesting, and then I had to convince them to convince their parents to fork up money. That was challenging. And then the other issue was that the sales channel were the universities. So I had to gain access to universities, which worked for about 6 months. And then there was a decision coming down from Beijing that there's a little bit too much foreign influence on universities, and they became much less open to having foreigners come on and give seminars. So that basically, I already had a challenging sales cycle, and that killed my channel. And that was pretty much the end of the business, which was a good thing. It allowed me to make a very clear decision about 10 months in. This is not working. Let's kill it. Fortunately, I still had a good relationship with this consultancy, so I got in touch with them, and they said, yeah, we have some projects. I said, okay, I've got some time. So they brought me back on for about 8 more months, a couple interesting projects, and then I jumped out again. I don't know if they invited me out to dinner a couple years ago, so I suppose no hard feelings there, but that was a quick failure. But I think a lot of learning also in that failure. Lots of learning.
Yeah. That's good. And what was the trigger that you realized, okay, the IoT might be a big thing, or it's already a big thing, and then you start thinking about you opening up IoT One?
Yeah. This was one of the last projects I was doing with Applied Value. We were working with a solar company in the States, and cost reduction. So how can we take $100 million out of OpEx? And we were looking at every aspect of their organization, but we were really it became obvious that there were big questions or big aspects of their business that hadn't been reviewed before. Things like how do we do quality assurance on solar panels as they come off the line, right? So we were looking at the traditional things. Can we reduce? Can we offshore? Can we negotiate down component prices and so forth? Can we cut headcount? In management, have fewer layers of management, which are very traditional ways to, if you want to cut cost. But then we look at the quality assurance line, and we see, okay, you've got about 40 people that are just looking at these black panels as they come off the production line, and they're trying to see that are there too many little dots there? Is that swirl a little bit too large? So they're trying to make a very subjective decision of whether this should pass quality or not. And that's an extremely difficult job for a human to make, right? How do you decide if a swirl is a little bit too large or not? And it's a very tedious job that nobody wants to do. So there's a high turnover, not very good employee satisfaction. Nobody wants to do this job. And then you say, well, this is actually a great job for computers to do, right? They don't get bored. They're really good at determining whether a swirl is too big or too small. And so that was a case where machine vision was just an obvious solution. But this company, despite having a lot of PhDs, a lot of really smart people, they'd never looked in this domain because it was outside of their expertise. And that was the realization for me that you have this new domain, which is industrial or digital technologies. And the majority of companies in the world, even if they have a tremendous amount of domain expertise in their core competence, they don't really know anything about this domain, and there's a big knowledge gap there. So that was the kind of the realization for me that this is something interesting. Before that, I'd already been personally interested in the technologies. So then it was a good match of, okay, there's obviously some business opportunity here, and I have a strong personal interest, and I was able to put those together through IoT One.
And how did you actually start the company? Did you bootstrap, or you had the partners, or you had some initial capital that you inject in the company?
Yeah, so actually at that point my intent was not to start a company, right? I just burned through all of my savings, also through all of Mia's savings, my girlfriend at the time, my wife now. So I was actually didn't have too much of an appetite for starting up a new company, and I had no cash basically. So I started applying. I said, okay, I have a consulting background. I need to learn more about this space. How can I do that? So I started applying to headhunters and saying, hey, I'm interested in working with this handful of companies, Alibaba Cloud, So I basically outlined what I'm interested in, and one of them called back and said, hey, you know what? We'd like to have a call with you. I said, okay, fair enough. And during the call, it became obvious that they were not, vetting me for a potential client. They were assessing me as a potential business partner. So. They, at the same time, had a similar intuition. They saw from their standpoint that their clients, who are, they have an executive recruiting business, that does kind of VP through China head, and they said, okay, this is obviously the top priority, or one of the top 3 priorities for senior executives. There's something really important going on here. It was also a case where they had kind of a personal interest in the topic as well. And so they said, we want to do something in this area, and we need somebody to run the business because they're running their existing businesses. And that was how it basically got kicked off. So we had 3 partners, myself, Michael, and Chun. Michael and Chun put up the capital to get us off the ground. I put in the time. Michael also operated kind of like a CMO. He's great network, so he supported with sales, still does. Chun operates as our COO, so everything related to back office to IT, Chun manages, but they're both also running their existing businesses. So that was the original team, still with them today.
Interesting. And can you describe what IoT does do? What kind of clients do you serve at the moment? What kind of services do you provide?
Yeah, sure. So we're a consultancy. Right? We focus on researching industrial IoT domains and then helping companies to develop strategies and implement strategies. Mostly we're working with 2 groups. So one would be the larger multinationals, kind of the Fortune 2000 companies that have $5 billion of revenue or more. So they're a big component of our clients. And for them, we're often doing somewhat more tactical work. Right? If they want something like strategy development, often they're going to go to McKinsey or BCG or so. And then we also do a lot of work with what we'd call in Germany the hidden champions. So these are the companies that might have between a few €100 million revenue through a few billion euro. They're kind of best in class at what they do, but they're in kind of a particular niche. And for them, we often do somewhat more strategic work. Those are the 2 big groups. We do some work for investment firms, VCs, PE firms, and also with sometimes with startups. I mean, startups are not very important from a revenue perspective, but it's interesting working with them. So those are the main clients. We're just setting up our first product. So this is IoT Learn and Do Sprint. So I mean, it's basically a methodology that we could do on a one-off basis, but now we're productizing this. We formed a joint venture with a German company that does e-learning, mobile learning. So they're building the application and managing the sales, because we're not a sales and marketing organization, right? We invest a lot of time building relationships with people, but when you sell a product, you need a different approach. So they're kind of managing that. We manage the domain expertise. So that's going to launch. I mean, we're already having conversations with people, with potential customers there, but it's basically launching in Q2. Yeah, that's our business today.
Sounds good. I would love to know a couple of challenges that you face as the foreigner running business in China.
Yeah, well, I mean, China's a fairly friendly place for foreigners, as long as you're not doing things that the government doesn't want you to do. I think we're not doing that, so that's okay. I mean, there are some challenges. Obviously, there's language challenges. There are some challenges related to just being a foreigner. You can't, you're supposed to be only working for one entity that is signed your contract and got you a work visa. So you're not supposed to be splitting time between multiple entities and so forth. So there's some issues that you just have to be aware of like that. But for me, that's not an issue. So I guess raising funds, if we wanted to do that, I think that's a little bit more challenging for foreigners. Yeah, I mean, there's some aspects of the business that are challenging if you want to like run a startup and you're trying to raise outside capital to scale rapidly, that we don't really face at IoT One. So from our perspective, it's okay. We also don't have very much local competition, so most of our competition is really from other foreign companies. So we're, if you're in that boat where maybe you're doing medical devices and you have some really strong local competitors, I think you have another set of challenges that again we don't face. But as a consultancy in this domain, I think it's okay actually. We don't really face any uphill battle, aside from the general battle of struggle of running your own business.
Right. That's good positioning. And coming back to the IoT sector, so you have offices as well outside of China, right, as IoT One?
Yeah, we set up in Munich last year.
And can you just think about some challenges and opportunities in IoT in China? And then if you compare IoT trends in China and outside of the world, are there any differences where the whole industry is moving?
Yeah, sure. So China's a super interesting market because over the past 30 years, they've built up this incredible asset base, right? The factory of the world. So you have a huge asset base, and the assets are often not very efficient, so they're not being utilized particularly well. And that's, for IoT, actually a great opportunity, because it means that the next 30 years is probably not going to be putting in more physical infrastructure. There's already overcapacity in some markets, but it's going to be looking at how can we use software, sensors, to better understand the infrastructure and run it more efficiently. So there's really a unique opportunity here. There are some challenges. So if we're looking at Germany, for example, you've got a workforce probably on average, if you look in a factory, 45 years old, 15 years of work experience in the factory, probably a college degree, at least 2 years of college. So you have a fairly experienced and well-educated workforce. If you look in China, maybe much higher turnover than in Germany, so less experience, younger workforce, likely they don't have college experience. So there's certainly some challenges in terms of technology adoption. Right? So that's a big issue. Often simplicity is more important here, whereas in Germany, maybe products might be over-engineered for, let's say they're engineered to the specs that are expected in Germany. They come to China, and it's over-engineered. It's more complicated than it needs to. That complexity adds cost, and so the product doesn't fit the market here very well. So that's pretty typical. Yeah, you have, I think, really significant opportunities here. So in manufacturing, when you look at also sustainability, this is a huge priority for the Chinese government right now. And this is another area where IoT is very relevant, right? Understanding how we use energy, understanding where pollution is and how we can improve control of pollution points. So there's a lot of opportunity here that I think to some extent it maps to the global trends, but because of China's scale and because of their history, they have unique challenges which then become opportunities for technology providers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And let's make a step back and look at the time when you start running Startup Grind Shanghai chapter. It's been already for quite a few years. I joined 3 years ago, and I think before that you've been running already for 3 years or so. Why did you start running the chapter? So what was the reason behind it?
Yeah. So it was a little bit similar to how I set up IoT One. I didn't intend to start running Startup Grind here, right? I was just looking for interesting communities to join. I knew that I wanted to join a community around entrepreneurship so that I could meet more entrepreneurs and learn around, about this topic, right? So I scanned, I think, what's the website that nobody uses anymore? The one that WeWork bought. Anyways, I scanned different communities. I found Startup Grind, and I saw that they had, on the one hand, maybe 50 people registered on this platform in Shanghai. So I said, there's a community here that's interested in this, but nope, they've never had any events. So I wrote to Derek Anderson, the founder, and I said, hey, Derek, why have you never hosted any events in Shanghai? I think there's a lot of interest here. And he said, hey, why don't you host an event? So it was a little bit of a trap there. I fell into the trap. At the same time, a guy named Albert Young had also communicated with them. So he said, hey, there's somebody else named Albert who's interested. Why don't you guys have coffee? I met Albert, great guy. We're still friends today, although he's moved back to LA. So we said, let's set it up together. We then pulled Mia in, my girlfriend, and at the time my wife now. So got her involved. Then all of a sudden we had 3 people on the team, and we started setting up events. And it was stressful at the beginning, right? We'd get out of events with a box full of things that we would bring, just whatever, paper and drinks and stuff. And at that time there was no DD, so you'd be looking for a taxi at 11 p.m. super tired from running your business, making no money. So it was stressful, but it was always super. I always loved the events. I met super interesting people. I learned a lot from people. So it was a great experience.
So when was it? It was back
2012.
2012.
Yeah.
So it's been already 8 years.
Yeah.
Was it the first chapter in China or Beijing?
No, I think either Shenzhen or Guangzhou was the first chapter, and that was about a year earlier than us.
Wow, wow, that's super interesting. If someone doesn't know about Startup Grind, please do check out. It's an amazing community, lots of support. Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, many chapters in China. And before I drive you to the next meeting, Erik, what is the innovation for you? How do you define it?
Oh, what is innovation?
Yes.
Yeah, I think for me, innovation is just finding an unmet need and it's solving that need, in a new way. So, when that can be a technical solution, it can be a business model solution, it can be a service, it can be a way of delivering a service, but it's just saying, okay, somebody has a need in the world, some group of people have a need, and for whatever reason, that need's not being met sufficiently now, and I think I have an idea about how I can solve that, and that's innovation. And if you do that well, you can create a business out of it. So sometimes innovation gets, for me, a little bit too tied up with technology. And I tell my clients this as well, right? I mean, if you need to use the most cutting edge technology to solve a problem, great. But if you don't need to, then why do it, right? Find the solution that works. So that's how I think of innovation.
Thank you. Yeah. Very interesting. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much for sharing. Very useful, very interesting tips. That was In China Between Meetings episode with Erik Walenza-Slabe. Please do subscribe to our channels on YouTube and WeChat, and stay tuned for the next episode.